So, hey everyone, how you all doing today? We're going to be playing this game for quite some time, or at least I am anyways, I should say. I need to get out of the habit of doing the we shit, because I'm not British, obviously, and I don't want to really portray myself as. I just do that as an affectation of the action I'm engaging with, which of course is to engage with some kind of audience, which there are people who do sometimes tune into my fucking videos, but apparently they're very, stay for very long. Obviously, because I'm not really saying anything, I'm just playing the game. And occasionally making noises here and there and trying to say things. But they don't really stay beyond 14 seconds. So, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I mean, what am I supposed to do here exactly? How am I supposed to be entertaining? Fuck if I know. I mean, that's what the little segments are for, really. I play a game, and then you stay for the segments, and you see my thoughts on various different YouTubers. And those are the things I'm going to be cutting out of my videos. And I'm eventually, going to make sure to take certain areas of my gameplay and eventually, just cut it up into various different videos. But how do I get people to actually stay for those eventually? I guess I just gotta stream them and make them. So, hopefully I can go ahead and start downloading content sometime soon for my own channel and, repurposing it. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to have to be doing. Then I'm going to be doing a fan fiction, obviously, but right now I like to play games to experience them and capture my experience on, everything else I'm doing here. So, which is why, by the way, if I ever do a review and I start using, game footage of my own stuff, let it be known here, right here and now, that I will quite literally never use the conversations as a point of reference of what it is I'm saying here. The reviews will be pretty much what they are. Yeah. Obviously, they're even produced that I upload here, but what can you do, I guess I could play the game a second time and capture the footage, but why do that when I could just do my initial instruction? Which, by the way, I will be doing a review of Space Marine 2 at some point in time. So, yeah. Oh, and I also try to make a habit of video starting with what it is I'm doing right now and how it does one day. Which, by the way, doing great. We're going to be talking about Vaush video. In fact, we'll probably do an entire video.
Protect the antenna! Reloading weapon! completed.
The enemy have damaged the antenna!
Restocking. Restocking.
The enemy have damaged the antenna!
I need help.
Focus your rage and
I'm gonna assume I'm going to probably fail at this.
Very good.
take on the winged vermin.
Protect the antenna. Reload. Munitions secured. They will not get past.
Fresh magazine.
Vermin and stuff.
More gargoyles headed for the antenna!
Take out those mines.
The enemy are going for the antenna! Eliminate them!
Listen.
The enemy have damaged the antenna! The enemy have damaged the antenna!
On the track.
We must hold them back!
Target destroyed. Special tactics.
My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
single one of them are one.
Check the antenna.
Changing magazine.
The enemy have damaged the antenna.
Reload.
Two enemies.
More gargoyles headed for the antenna.
Reloading.
The enemy are going for the antenna. Eliminate them. The enemy have damaged the antenna.
Reloading weapon.
Ah, damn. These guys are overwhelming us. Fuck. Okay, this is kind of a hard area because I guess it's like, you know, I put on very hard. I don't remember. I think it was just hard.
The enemy have damaged the antenna.
Here come the winged vermin.
Check the antenna.
Throwing frag grenade.
More gargoyles headed for the antenna.
Resupplying. Incoming mine.
The enemy are going for the antenna. Eliminate them. The enemy have damaged the antenna. antenna! We must hold them back! My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
One moment, brothers.
My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
Yep. I did not get there in time at all. But I could forestall some of this stuff by Nemo.
Here come the winged vermin.
Protect the antenna.
The Gamma Cat.
The enemy have damaged the antenna! We must hold them back!
Okay, now that I know where everything's at, I can go to this mission, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up this all the way over here.
Here come the winged vermin.
Protect the antenna. Let us get to work.
The enemy have damaged the antenna!
Another one dead.
More gargoyles headed for the antenna!
Take out those mines.
The enemy are going antenna! The enemy have damaged the antenna!
Changing magazine. Throwing frag grenade.
We must hold them back! The enemy have damaged the antenna!
Reload.
We must hold them back!
Got you. Munition secured. Stabilizing vitals.
My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
Yeah, almost had it too. Almost fucking had it if it wasn't for the. Hold on. I have all the time I need here. You see, if that was over here, I would be having a run for it, you know?
Here come the winged vermin.
Protect the antenna. A fine gift from the
If that was
force.
over there, I would have to do that. Yeah.
The enemy have damaged the antenna!
Grenade out!
We must hold them back! The enemy have damaged the antenna!
I cannot get up!
Keep your head. I have you.
I am up.
We must hold them back! My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
Reloading weapon.
My lord, the antenna has sustained significant damage!
Ah, damn, man, this fucking level was really hard. And honestly, if I'm not gonna be able to get past this part, honestly, I'm gonna go and go to the battle board here. And do an online campaign. Why not? You know? If I'm at that point, I might as well. I was hoping to get through the first mission at the very least, but I gotta say, this game is fairly tough. Like, it involves a sense of strategy. Okay, I've got to go and go for that gun, not at the beginning, but at some point in the middle. Like, you know. And I've got to make sure to, like, you know. Apparently, there's a game of chess going on here. Then I gotta get a little bit better. Because I get to the very last one. So, yeah. Wait, did that seriously? I don't believe it. I have to do that thing all the fuck over again? I was at the end, man. What the fuck? Oh well, I guess that's how you go into the online game. Maybe quitting gets me to the online game, maybe? That's what I want to do, honestly. Or maybe I have to do... Yeah, maybe I have to do the... Oh well, whatever. We were going to do this debate review anyway, so might as well go and do it. Half an hour.
So anyway, let's get the formalities out the way. My name's Aiden Jones. My pronouns are he, him. And
oh, I'd like to go and point out here real quick that when it comes to my particular view on religion, whether or not this is a problem, depending on how you put forth that particular claim, the answer is yes and no. Both simultaneously and at the same time and not at the same time, depending on what you're talking about. My particular issue with religion tends to be in the form of theocracy. In other words, I don't want to be ruled by a theocratic regime that takes it into itself to actually decide what it is I should think and what it is I should say. Because my views are my own, and they're not yours, and you don't control them, and no one else does. So, yeah. There'll be people who will misrepresent me and criticize me, and that much I can kind of understand. But, you know, you don't get to tell me what I get to say and do. So,
and I am the Christian anarchist that I mentioned.
Yes, I remember. I barely skimmed over your email because I was playing lots of video games yesterday and reading One Piece, and those are very important to me. So you're going to have to reiterate your disagreements with me.
Yeah, fair enough. So the main things I wanted to talk about were mainly Marxism. Let me get my email up actually because I think I forgot to. It was Marxism, LGBT issues. I believe it was also abortion philosophy, and if you're brave enough, theology. I guess, even though I'm aware that's not really your wheelhouse or anything, but you know.
I feel like I'm confident enough in any of those subjects. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I reckon we could probably start with Marxism because there's a few things because I would consider myself pretty left-leaning. However, there's a few areas of left-leaning thought, I guess you could say, that I'm not quite aligned with, and I guess Marxism would be one of them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So well, first.
Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. I'm trying to get Peter in the video with me. He wants a treat. It's just he doesn't want to be held right now, I guess. So sometimes he does, but I guess right now he doesn't. So hold on, Peter. Hold on. Get up if you can. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So. Hi, Peter.
So anyway, let's get the formalities out of the way. My name's Aiden Jones. My pronouns are he, him, and I am the Christian anarchist that I mentioned.
Yes, I remember. I barely skimmed over your email because I was playing lots of video games yesterday and reading One Piece, and those are very important to me. So you're going to have to reiterate your disagreements with me.
Yeah, fair enough. So the main things I wanted to talk about were mainly Marxism. Let me get my email up actually because I think I forgot to. It was Marxism, LGBT issues. I believe it was also abortion philosophy, and if you're brave enough, theology. I guess, even though I'm aware that's not really your wheelhouse or anything, but you know.
I feel like I'm confident enough in any of those subjects. What do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I reckon we could probably start with Marxism because there's a few things because I would consider myself pretty left-leaning. However, there's a few areas of left-leaning thought, I guess you could say, that I'm not quite aligned with, and I guess Marxism would be one of them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So well, first of all, I am even though I am an anarchist and I do believe in a lot of left-leaning economic policies, for example, I think that a lot of Marxist principles. Well, again, my Western imperialist education has taught me that Marxism is the poopy head.
Hold on, we're getting Peter some treats. Yeah, turkey kind. So
Economics philosophy or whatever, but yeah, so I guess we could start there, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're an anarchist, then you already would have had to have defied a lot of the more hegemonic Western capitalist cultural propaganda, right? I mean, surely if you're an anarchist, you're familiar with most of the retorts people would use to besmirch Marxism.
Oh yeah, 100%. And a lot of those retorts are completely invalid, but some of them aren't quite. I guess to be specific, the main area that that I have an issue with Marxism is historical materialism, for example. So I think that would be a good place to start. Even though I do think historical materialism is it's pretty useful when applied in certain circumstances, I do think it has a lot of limitations, and I think the fact that Marx was such a materialist has really weighed down leftist thought. Anytime anybody has to talk about what communism could look like or what any ideal society could look like, it always has to be framed from the framework of Marxism and what Marx did. So it feels like we're sort of haunted by his ghost, as it were. You know what I mean?
Well,
and
I don't necessarily.
He never really painted. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm not like a proselytizer for orthodox Marxism or anything, and he was a modernist, which I'm not. Dialectical materialism and historical materialism are good sociological frameworks. They're useful in their analysis, but they're not holistic. Nothing can be. I don't disagree with that at all. And I do think that the obsession with historical materialism as a single unifying mode of historical analysis does sometimes cripple leftists, especially when when it comes to modern pragmatic issues. I'm not like an orthodox Marxist or anything like that. I would disagree on a great many things with some Marxists.
Oh, well, fair.
Since we're talking about it, might as well say something, and I think it's important to say this by and large. That is, of course, I am not a Marxist. I'm a technocrat. So, and for what it's worth, my technocracy, more or less, is composed of completely and utterly voluntary, self-sustaining city systems of high technology and high-rise AI living standards. So, yeah, hope that helps.
Fair enough. And but you still have described yourself as a materialist, for example, and I guess I'm more in the Hegelian idealist sort of camp. You know, I'm saying these words like I know what they mean, but you'll have to bear with me. But yeah, I mean, naturally, I am Christian, so if I'm going to be adopting a philosophy, it's probably going to be idealism, I guess. But
Why?
one of my bigger criticisms of Marx was that he never really. Why am I an idealist?
What's the relationship in your mind between being religious and being an idealist?
Well, to me, spiritual concepts are not really that categorically different from abstract concepts. That ultimately, a spiritual concept is basically a rational concept in the sense that it appeals to something that is immaterial, but it doesn't really exist in the real world, but it does exist in like the world of forms, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. Like, for example, you can make like a lot of rational, logical proofs for like God or whatever, that sort of thing.
People
In the
have
same way
argued
that you can make arguments. Yeah, like in the same way that you can make arguments for like, I guess, math existing or something like that. Not to say that the two are like comparable in the same way, but you know, like they're both in the realm of rationality, I would say.
The distinction between Hegelian idealism and Marxist materialist thought is driven mostly by what you think has the larger impact on historical forces. But I think even if you're religious, which, I mean, of course, many socialists have been historically, you can still believe that material forces are that which have the greater effect on human.
I'm going to be right back. Went out just for 2 cookies. Came back with some popcorn. No, Peter, this is not for you. Ooh, it's dripping with butter. That's good. Yeah. Peter? Peter? No, Peter? I'll get some water, fresh water. I'll see about probably moving that there sometime over here, the fridge, obviously.
In history and historical development. And my issue, like, or to put it another way, if you're dealing with spiritual issues, they tend to be metaphysical in nature, and many Christians will readily admit that, you know, the God is a kind of watchmaker who set in motion all these forces, principles,
I plan on actually agreeing a lot with Vaush here.
and objects, and it is by those mechanisms that we all follow, you know? Like, if you follow the watchmaker interpretation of God's creation, it would sort of necessarily follow that it would be through the interactions of these forces materially that would lead to the development of human historical progress. I just don't think there's necessarily like a deterministic relationship between idealism and being religious.
Well, yeah, so there's 2 points there. Well, I guess that's mainly my concern, that I like basically the tension is that you either believe like human behavior and ideals is what drives history, or material circumstances. And I am on the side of believing that ideals are the stronger force, because I am aware that, like, for example, material conditions obviously play a huge part in, you know, our behavior and how society develops. But I still think that of the two forces, ideals and behaviors and like that sort of thing are the stronger driving force, mainly because you could say, for example, a lot of our lives and human behavior is determined by, you know, like our society, basically, that, you know, whether or not you're poor, what area you grow up in, etc., etc. But then we have to ask the question, well, then what determines our society? You know, it's a bit of a chicken and egg sort of thing, where it's like, you know, our environments determines us, but we determine our environment at the same time. And I think that we humans are ultimately the stronger force in that sense, if that makes sense.
It's a broad analytical thing, but of course we also control the material factors. You could argue that the material factors include our interests as a class, and that it's through our interests as a class that we shape ideology. You know, Marx would have argued that modern bourgeois ideology is a product of their intent on keeping class relations favorable to their...
Now, I'll be perfectly honest, which I understand. I just want to hear where Vaush stands on this before I start making my particular points on this. However, I do tend to agree with him in the sense that ideas and changes in culture are a driving force in the human understanding and well-being, because our ability to be able to accept things like, I don't know, democracy, secularism, and other modes of governance that are not like religiously oriented. Our ability to be able to have those is a marked improvement and marks the improvement of the material conditions of society. So I agree with him on that. So I'm curious to hear what Vaush thinks.
Interests as a class, and that it's through our interests as a class that we shape ideology. You know, Marx would have argued that modern bourgeois ideology is a product of their intent on keeping class relations favorable to their interests as the bourgeois. But this is a largely non-falsifiable point. It's what mode of analysis you choose to engage with. It's not like there's any hardcore data on like, well, actually, it's the, you know, 5 ideas to every 7 materials is the ratio. So, you know, whatever you prefer to analyze.
Yeah, that's fair enough. But I think like one of the limitations of using historical materialism as the main thing is that, well, ironically, Well, there's two things. Well, first of all, like I said before, Marx didn't really give us a good picture of what an ideal society would look like, other than very vague, broad strokes, nothing too specific. And I think when it comes to like leftist sort of systems that we've come up with that have actually been more specific. For example, I'm a massive fan of anarcho-syndicalism, but if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm one of the few anarcho-syndicalists. That's why I consider myself an anarchist. But I'm one of the few anarcho-syndicalists that sort of realizes anarcho-syndicalism isn't really communism. But I'm like okay with that, if that makes sense. A lot of anarcho-syndicalists will say, "Oh, no, it's communism," but like that's the thing. I don't really see it as communism, if that makes sense,
It's fine.
because it still requires a free market sort of thing.
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it requires a free market. You know, it requires it requires like self-interested economic blocks and worker communes. I think I mean it doesn't really matter to me like the details of a future society. I feel like leftists have wasted a lot of time trying to conceptualize it. If you have to put, you the only direction you can ever go, no matter which direction you're choosing to head in, the only step that you can take when walking up a staircase is the next one. There's no alternative to that. I feel like when you put the destination ahead of the means by which you will journey there, you get like these really weird, abstract, meaningless, hypothetical political obsessions that don't have any relationship to reality or what we can do in reality. Which is why leftists in the West are like, killing each other over which particular flavor of communism they want. Meanwhile, like capitalism is more entrenched than it's ever been in all of human history. It's completely meaningless.
He's not wrong there. So.
Well, see, I'd actually very much disagree there, because I think the main reasons that leftists are divided is because of like that we don't have a single unified idea to unite behind. If we could like really lay out a picture of what exactly it is we want and unify behind that, because it's always been
It'll never happen. It's impossible.
Well, I mean, maybe not so much with leftists, but if you look throughout human history, it has always been like these grand myths. I don't think that communism has to be like a myth or untrue or anything, but, myth in the sense that it's a story that brings us together sort of thing. That very much gets at sort of abstract ideals, like of heroism, of progress, whatever it may be.
I strongly disagree.
I think that,
this is your idealism. What gets these big movements moving is materialism. What led to capitalists to...
Not really. I mean, there have been revolutions of thought and ideas based on scholastic and academic understanding. The intelligentsia producing ideas or producing notions, telling stories. People who create art actually do contribute quite a bit to the civilizational, like, foray in how things work. I mean, our understanding of physics only came about due to our understanding of the world itself. I mean, beforehand, we didn't really know what the fuck was what anything. We couldn't conceptualize anything. Material conditions didn't mean anything if we didn't have the conceptualization, therefore. And we need ideology. We need people producing stories. We need people producing myths. We need people producing the things that we're producing effectively in terms of like getting us to agree with things and getting us to like move forward, and having that and not having that creates anxiety or lessens anxiety. So
like modes of production and flourishing was not the ideological precedent, but rather changes in the modes, means, and consumption of production that allowed for its possibility. Every time this happens, you have this great historical economic shift, You have like the agricultural revolution, and you have empires, and you have colonialism, and you have mercantilism, and all this, what have you, feudalism. It's not
that stuff happens, but none of it is really the driving force. What's the driving force is our ability to conceptualize. People like, for example, George Lucas, as a contemporary example, literally had to build much of the technology in order to be able to create a lot of what he was doing with regards to the prequels as well as the original trilogy. Like, the things that he did weren't done before he did them. So
developed by people, sitting there and thinking, oh, wouldn't this be a great idea on its own? The advancements of class dynamics and technological progress allow for different types of optimized production and consumption. Um, the only thing that can unify people behind a common socialist ideal is to set the stage for socialism to be the only logical and productive and efficient mode of economic production. Everything has to be set in its place. It has to be the next logical step. You can't leap steps over history. You have to take the next one. You have to go where historical progression follows.
Well, yeah, like I said, I don't disagree that material circumstances have a massive part to play, and I would still employ like historical materialism as a mode of analysis, but like you said, not the only one. But the thing is, right, you mentioned how like everything needs to be set in place, and then people will start to rally behind socialism. Kind of like if we start taking over the government or whatever, however we do it, and we, make social like basically we start implementing policies that are socialist or whatever, that will start to get people on board with socialism. But once again, it's the chicken or the egg thing. So how do you get people rallied behind you know I guess those sorts of principles?
Well, I don't
Like
think you I don't think
without
you
an
do get
ideal.
people. Principles are irrelevant. It's not like capitalism happened because a bunch of people were ideologically capitalists. Like capitalism didn't happen because millions of members of the peasantry and proletariat like rose up and were like, we now ideologically believe in capitalism. That came afterwards. The ideology was post hoc. It was something that the elites disseminated to legitimize the systems that were put into place.
that's not
I don't
right.
think it has anything to do with changing people's minds. It's about getting a critical mass of people together who believe in some kind of single change, and that change is endemic to or leads to socialism being the only like viable means of production in the future. It's not about getting people ideologically on board with socialism. It's just about like getting people's basic needs aligned with whatever changes would
The armrest on my right hand side just came off.
be necessary to fulfill them, and that would have to be socialism.
It's not cheap. It's just
Right,
like
but okay, so he would be
the screw came out is what happened. So yeah.
an example, right? In the Catholic Church, which, by the way, I despise, I'm not that kind of Christian. And to be fair, neither are the Catholics Christian, but I don't want to get into that just yet. But the thing is that the Catholic Church basically had a thing against what they would call usury, quote unquote, and basically it meant that like you couldn't charge interest on anyone, and that would have hamstrung capitalism for quite a bit. Like it would be very difficult to start your own businesses based on the policies of the Catholic Church, pretty much. Except to like, I guess if you were like Jewish, you wouldn't have those rules and you would be allowed to, and that's how they would primarily do it. But it was very much limited in its capacity. You couldn't do it as much as you would like to. Now, when the Reformation happened, which was very ideologically charged, I think you would agree. Like the Reformation happened purely like there were no material circumstances definitely helped the Reformation, because he wouldn't, like Martin Luther would never have been able to do what he did without the printing press. However, the ideals that drived all that happening were purely he had a problem with the fact that Catholics were all being hypocrites. And that's basically what started it all. And then after that, you have the Calvinists who were the deterministic ones, who were extremely.
I'll be honest. The points that Vaush is making, while I do agree with them, I also agree with the other guy as well to some degree. But there are problems that Vaush has had, and I have to point them out, obviously. And the other guy, what he's saying isn't even wrong. In fact, I agree with him more so than I agree with Vaush. But I do there are things that Vaush is saying again that I do necessarily agree with. So yeah. Oh, huh.
Basically, their theology is such that the only way you can prove that you've been saved by God, because they have no way of knowing, is that if you do good works, even though good works aren't supposed to save. It's a whole complicated process, but basically their theology accidentally made them more capitalist, and that's what sort of caused it to flourish perhaps more than what it would have. Now, does that mean that capitalism wouldn't have happened had all this stuff not happened? No, I think it still would have happened. The material conditions, like you said, would have brought it about eventually, but it's like can it happen earlier than it could have? I think it could have
But
if the
you're
ideals are
missing
behind it.
you're missing the preceding steps. The only reason religious leaders insisted to their flock that it was virtuous to do hard work for those above you was because they lived in theocratic states where the church's interests were aligned with those of the monarchy.
That's where you're wrong. I'm talking about the Calvinists here in particular, who were very much against, well, because all Reformationists were against the Catholic Church, who was the archetype of this, authoritarian theocracy that ruined people's lives. The Reformationists didn't want that.
They still formed their own communities, and even within those communities, people in charge of the church benefited from the hard, unrequited work of their flock. This even happened when folks moved over to America. Like the Mormons did the same thing, the inherent moral virtue of hard work. But Mormons have never controlled the United States. I mean, not in its totality, at least. But back when they were limited just to like small Mormon towns and stuff, they still pushed that angle. One of the reasons that slave owners taught Christianity to the slaves was because of the Protestant work ethic. The idea that like, maybe life sucks for you now because you're a slave, but if you work hard, you get to heaven, and like it'll all be fine there. So yeah, just like be content with this. At least you're being given the opportunity to do hard work. But all of it is born out of class dynamics to begin with. Like all this is being done because it's profitable to get your flock to be productive in that way.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, the core of Protestant Christianity, the thing that if you ask any Protestant, that this is the drum they will bang, and that is that faith alone is what saves. There's this whole dichotomy within our religion about does faith save or does works save? And by faith, I mean just believing in God and maybe repenting, and works meaning like, donating to charity or, doing hard work or getting baptized, whatever it is. And it is the core defining aspect of Protestantism that works do not save. It is the thing they will die on a hill for.
And yet,
that's absolutely. Well, yeah, they will still like get people to work, but it is not the thing that they.
It's literally called the Protestant work ethic. The idea that working hard, like it beget, like in America, you have like faith seeding, where the idea of like like working and donating money to your mega churches will beget further outcomes for you, and you have to work hard to plant that initial seed. The idea, the idea. I'm just pointing out like the idea that it's virtuous to work hard for your betters has been a component of basically every single institutionalized religion in the past several thousand years. Like no matter where you go, Shintoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Hinduism, Christianity and its 1,000 different sects, Judaism, Islam, there's always some overriding a pressure on the part of the flock to like work hard for your betters, and whether that's like the elders or like the community at large, or like it's always in some way a reaffirmation of one class's interests over another. And
what the Alright, first of all, in deeply religious communities, specifically communities in which individuals more or less have like a sort of monkish or fairly like, religiously priestly sort of vibe here. Over in the eastern areas, as well as even in Judaism, like a lot of that priest stuff is meant to be, of course, not meant to be like giving respect because of like they're the elders or whatever, but because that they are priests, they are people who spend their life studying this thing, giving forth interpretations, giving forth ideas of what it is you think is in it, and he acts, or they act, sometimes it's a they, sometimes it's not always like, a single priest, because a priest can't always like run the entirety of the church by themselves, because it is a building, as, whether we're talking like, as well as like, even within the prospect of like Catholicism, for example. Like Catholicism, yes, you do have the hierarchy of like Catholicism by and large, but that's only to maintain the fact that, hey, there's this theology going on here, and you don't work for your betters. You don't even have to work for the church. You just have to go to the church to be a Catholic, and you have to believe the same things that the Catholic priests obviously say. But beyond that, you aren't really like, unless of course you're being ran in a theocracy, which, safe to say, the Catholic Church has become at one point in time. but it wasn't always that the case, and it wasn't like it is no longer that the case now. So, I mean, come on. And even within the Eastern religions, Shintoism, Buddhism, like, what are you talking about with regards to those particular religions? Because from what I understand, like, the elders or the people who are older, who are very much like, who have been there for quite some time, they're given seniority because not only are they there for most of the time, they're like, matter of fact, I'm kind of curious exactly what is it with Shintoism in terms of their churches? Like, do we really know what how they worship exactly? How is Shinto worship done? In fact, let's look that up real quick. Like,
If you want your website to rank high in search engines, SEMrush is the
this is like, no, I'm not gonna suffer through a fucking ad just because the ad blocker on this thing doesn't want to be used for the moment. So this is one of the Shintos do to the houses every now and again. I suppose new houses. So yeah.
So I get asked from time to time in the comments about whether there are ghosts in the house, and I've been a bit dismissive of it, but some of our Japanese friends have mentioned that they feel something when they were cleaning up. So I guess as a precaution, we decided to do an oharai, which is a Japanese Shinto purification ceremony. Shinto is one of the two main religions in Japan, the other being Buddhism. Shinto venerates many gods or spirits known as kami. Kami are believed to be everywhere and inhabit both the living and the dead, organic and inorganic matter, and are often associated with a specific place. Harai is the purification of pollution or sins and uncleanliness of people, places and objects. These concepts include bad luck, disease, guilt or even exorcism. First, before the ceremony we had to clean the house. That meant cleaning all of the torn paper from the shoji in all of the rooms and vacuuming all the tatami. The house looks really clean now and is scrubbed up well. I also had to tidy up the area in front of the small stone shrines called hokora. One of the reasons for the oharai was to appease the spirit of the previous owner in case he was upset with all the mess we were making during the renovations. I think he'd be pretty happy with how clean the house is looking now. This is the Kamidana, the family's Shinto shrine. For the oharai, we provided offerings to the kami. We'll also perform the oharai in front of the hokora as well. The ceremony is performed by a local Shinto priest.
So we're kind of getting the vibes here. We're basically getting the general vibes here, okay? It's I guess he walks around a little bit here. Okay, let's see what he's doing while he's walking around. He's carrying something here. Okay. I see. Okay, what's in here? Yeah, it's like Okay, so what exactly is this? How is this working for your betters? Exactly. This seems fair, not only fairly innocuous, but also it's like if some people feel a certain fashion in this way, it's like whatever. Like, and it seems to bring a sense of community. Honestly, this seems to be about like community. This seems to be a very community-oriented religion, which makes sense since it's mostly in Japan. It seems. Matter of fact, where is Shintoism? Since we're only doing this, by the way, since Shintoism was actually mentioned here, it's a little bit of a fact check, honestly. Most prominent. Japan. Where is Shintoism? Oh, it's primarily practiced in Japan. So Shinto is, so you might find a few Shintos here and there, but chances are they're probably like Japanese. Is Shintoism elsewhere? Shinto has spread to other countries through Japanese migration, the expansion of the Empire of Japan, and non-Japanese individuals embracing the religion. Shinto shrines can be found around the world, including in the. Okay, so it's found around the world, but can primarily be found in Japan. Then that seems to be the issue. Okay, I wasn't too sure. I wasn't sure if Shintoism was actually a world religion. Honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. I've seen Hindu shrines. I've seen a lot of other shrines with regards to Buddhism. I've never seen a Shinto shrine. And it's primarily because it's like I live in Sacramento and I've gone to other places throughout the United States. I've never really seen a Shinto shrine. So in fact, let's just for the sake of it, Shintoism in America. Alright, so where is the Subaru? Okay, depending, since this is like a mainstream one, this will actually give us an understanding of where it is we're at here. Not a bit of a rabbit hole, just trying to get an understanding of like how Shintoism is around. Okay, it's not in the United States. I thought so. That did not look like a. Oh, Granite Falls, Washington. Okay. Oh, it's in the state of Washington, over in Granite Falls. Okay, that's interesting. So yeah, and Buddhism, like the whole elder thing with Buddhism is the fact that these people have been there for the longest, and therefore, like you actually go to them through your wisdom, but you don't work for them. They're not like okay, yeah. Technically, I guess if you're a Buddhist or whatever, and you're a monk, and you're at their shrine and whatnot, technically, I guess the eldest guy would be the boss. But come fucking on, I mean, wouldn't you say that the oldest person there is usually should be the guy in charge when it comes to like religious matters? That's usually the case. I mean, but I don't know. That's it. There's something about religion and age, more or less, that indicates that if you're in this particular organization or a particular standing in society involving religion, the older you are, the more leeway your word carries when it comes to religious matters. Of course, that is only, of course, if you actually give any two fucks about religious matters, which honestly I really don't. So, I mean, I understand why. I understand it's important, and I understand it's a community thing, so I will pretend to give a fuck, but deep down inside, I really don't care. I just don't.
I mean, you know, throughout history, the rule rather than the exception has been religious leaders working with governmental leaders. So it's not surprising that those.
There's been also another, like, what? What? It's like saying that that's a rule. have you actually compared all the times that that's happened versus all the times on which the opposite has happened? Like groups like the Cathars have been like killed off by religious individuals primarily because religion served as the government, but they viewed the Cathars as people who were a threat to them primarily because they were pacifists. Like that's there are also like tons and tons of time on which Buddhism has been used quite literally in revolutionary modes. By the way, there have been times when which like Buddhists have actually stayed out of the issue there. You'd have to compile the entire history, the entire 10,000 years of human history, or 3,000 years of recorded history, to give us an understanding of whether or not this is actual like a rule. And I don't think you've actually done that. I don't believe you've done that. I don't think anyone actually ever has. Okay? I don't think no one has ever actually done a study like that. Let's see here. Matter of fact, let's just do a fact check on that. Has religion primarily been used as a tool of the state? That is basically what you're saying here. Or is it a general rule that religion sized is used as a tool of the state? Well, I'm not going to take the AI here, but let's see what it has to say, just because it's chiming in. Okay. No, it is not a general rule that religion is used as a tool of the state. In fact, the concept of separation of church and state is a fundamental principle in many countries, particularly in the United States. Okay, so this is talking about contemporary, okay? How about historical? Historically, a general rule. There we go. Okay, it's apparently the AI is actually giving us something different then, because, and honestly, I just wanted the AI to actually understand what it is I was saying, but yeah. Yes, historically, it is generally considered that religion has often been used as a tool of the state, with many societies throughout history having an established state religion where the government actively employed religious beliefs to maintain social order, control populations, and legitimize their power. This is especially evident in the concept of a theocracy, where religious leaders directly govern based on religious law. Okay, so if we're talking about theocracy, yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm not exactly a fan of theocracy myself, obviously, for fucking very obvious reasons. In fact, I'm an atheist. Should be one of them. But let's go ahead and go through some of these areas here, shall we? For most of history, many governments had an official religion, often with the monarch as the head of the church, which meant citizens were expected to adhere to that faith and could face persecution for not doing so. Okay, it says for most of history, many governments had an official religion. I gotta stop you right there. Like, it's talking about the Western world, not about tribal societies, not about ancient civilizations, which Greek and like Rome, like Greek and Rome are a particularly interesting group because for one, Greece is like an area in which the churches, I mean not the churches, the temples and the gatherings, as well as like the various different societies that were set about to worship religion and to engage in religious worship, they were primarily important. And there was a lot of governance that happened on the scheme of religion, on the issue of religion. But there was no marriage between the church and the state. The Greece had religious leaders, had leaders that were very much involved with the temples, involved with ceremony and all this stuff, but but the church, but the temples, sorry, I keep wanting to say churches, but the temples and the gatherings and even the societies that they were a part of often did not hold sway with their decision making. Like the institutions themselves were not actually involved in the saintly manner. Like sometimes if there was an issue of like, oh, should I free the slaves? Should I keep them or some shit like that with my rule? That would sometimes involve like you going to your temple, someone to Ares, maybe if you're an Aphrodite worship, you go to them, whatever, you know. And you might get involvement in that regard, but they're not. But the temple themselves don't actually like push out and seek to do that to actually influence like the governmental manners. So with Greece, that was not the case. And Greece encompasses a vast array of swath of history. You also have Rome. Rome is a complicated example because it was taken over by Christianity for a long time. But you had very much a sort of similar reference, with the exception being the emperor, and the emperor themselves were like a religious figure to some degree. Sometimes they were divine, other times they weren't. Egypt, ancient Egypt, you could say, is a theocracy, but it was like a weird theocracy in which the ruler was also the fucking leader of the highest church there, the most famous church. Sometimes it was Osiris, sometimes it was Seth, sometimes it was Horus, you know. Other times it was a fucking god Ra, you know. It all entirely depends on which god king you were talking about. And in fact, that's basically where we get the concept of the god king is from the Egyptians. So okay, a point there that happened. That was like a thing for a very long time. But there's also like a long period in which that kind of stopped becoming a thing. So not exactly a rule there. You also have, you know, humans up in the you also have human civilization and you know, humans believing in their myths, and the various different barbarian tribes that were barbarian in the sense of like, you know, I mean, human history goes back so long, and we can't really say for certain that that's a general rule. Is my point. But like, so I'm not exactly agreeing with what this AI is saying at all. But it's like, it does seem to be something that is like perpetuated. So by general information out there, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive. Maybe me and like Vaush can go and tease this shit out a little bit more. But yeah.
Elements would you know, continue to manifest.
Right. So I guess from your perspective, right, religion is very much just if not like a product of people just guessing wrong, it is a tool to control the populace, right? Like that would be your perspective on it, I'm guessing?
Maybe accidentally. I don't think it's like all being done in a sinister and deliberate fashion by people at the top. But yeah, I think that's the purpose that it serves, you know.
So then religion would be no more any different than any other institution, and it would therefore be a product of its circumstances, right? It would be a product of what is materially incentivized, right?
Yes.
So then why is the core, like this is like core Christianity basically, that you can...
I don't think that like there's a materially conditioned point of, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm going to be 100% real with you. I don't think that there is a material fucking reason to destroy the goddamn planet. At all. And I say that because there are Christians out there who want the fucking planet to be destroyed so they can have a second coming of Christ. I don't think that there's a material condition for that. There isn't really a material condition pushing that. It's entirely a death cult ideology. Sorry, but if you're a Christian who believes that the world is going to be destroyed in the second coming of Christ, and you are working towards that, day in and day out, you live in a death cult. Sorry to say. Now, if you're a Christian who doesn't think that, if you're a Christian who thinks that, oh, the end will come, but we don't know, we're not going to bother actually like living like it is, but we will keep to our faith, we will keep to our principles and whatnot, then all right, fine, whatever, power to you. As long as you're not oppressing anyone, I don't really give a flying fuck. As long as you're not committing to a theocracy, I don't care. Okay? But let's be perfectly real here, there's a lot of Christians who aren't that. So, yeah.
And not work hard to get to heaven. It is physically impossible. In fact, the early Christian church was so adamant about this that if you believed you could work to get to heaven, that would cause you, that's like one of the very few things that could cause you to not go to heaven, is believing you can work to earn it. The moment you add works, you've lost your salvation. At least this is a very much Protestant.
You can say that if you want, but the Protestant work ethic is one of the most well-recognized, like, religious socioeconomical phenomenon around. Like, the text of the religion is uninteresting me. People do what is actually, like, you know, socially begot from the culture of the religion, you know. Like, what Christianity says and what it, like, actually leads to are two very different things. And it's like, we know for a fact that historically and contemporarily, there is, absolutely like a culture of using faith as a way of prompting proletarian compliance within their class interest. Otherwise, what was all that bullshit about
Hold on for a second. The Protestant work ethic is based on the idea that diligence and a strong sense of responsibility in one's work can lead to both material success and spiritual salvation. Some Protestant groups believe that such prosperity is a sign of God's grace. German sociologist Max Weber argued that the Protestant work ethic was an important factor in the economic success of Protestant groups in the early stages of European capitalism. Weber's theory is outlined in his book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Some say that the Protestant work ethic can be self-flagellantly harsh and lead to inner conflict, tiredness, and other negative consequences. Now, I'd have to look this up, and I'm pretty sure that's probably something that's, like, there really. But let's be perfectly honest. If this description is any accurate at all, whatsoever, then unions are a strong thing to have for Protestant work ethic. Because, like, unions lead to not only workers being responsible with their ability to be able to manage their own value and manage their own worth, but also is a primary driver in, like, being able to guarantee quality. Because, let's be perfectly honest, a lot of workers that have unions are usually quality in terms of the work that they do. There is a high level of quality to union work as opposed to non-union work. Not necessarily saying that ununionized work is bad, but just to say that there's an inherent quality expected of union work. And that seems to be very much in line to the Protestant work ethic. And I never really looked it up, in all honesty, because I don't really give a flying fuck, because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, my whole thing is, like, I don't really care what kind of ethic you have, as long as you're treating your workers well and compensating them adequately for their work, and they're able to maintain a sort of living wage, if you would. That is all I care about. As well as them being happy and productive and, you know, obviously in some sense safe. I mean, you know, I think the most obvious thing is that I wish every human to be safe as it can be on the workspace and on the workplace. So, yeah.
teaching the slaves? I mean, that wasn't just like a couple of plantations. As a whole, I'm pretty sure black people today in America are more Christian than white people. And that's because damn near every slave ship that was brought over would be proselytized to. I mean, we're talking tens of millions of people in a coordinated effort across the, like, half a country in order to indoctrinate all of them into a certain set of beliefs. That's not, I mean, that's a pretty exceptional coincidence if there's no class interest. I mean, they didn't even think the slaves were human, basically, but they still felt a need to tell them that hard work would get them to heaven, you know?
Well, I wouldn't say that's the thing. You're saying that hard work would get them to heaven. From my perspective, they would probably just evangelizing them because they were quite literally a captive audience. And evangelists love them to death, but they're annoying. I'll say we are very annoying, and we will evangelize to anyone who will listen. And I very much doubt, like, if they were preaching Christianity, but then they weren't mentioning all the numerous verses that say works will not get you to heaven, works will not get you to heaven.
Christians ignore verses all the time in the Bible. Wait, hold on. What the Christians do has nothing to do with the Bible. Two totally different things.
Yeah, that is very true, and that's one of the issues that I do have with Christianity. I very much
there we go.
want to improve Christianity from within. I'm not trying to defend that aspect of it.
Well,
what I'm trying to say is that
you know what? It's been quite a bit here, and it's getting a little bit late. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here, and we will go ahead and do this again tomorrow. Hopefully we'll get through more and be able to actually go through this. But I think Vaush is making some terrible mistakes, and I am agreeing with the other guy a little bit more. So yeah. See you guys later.